Cinematic is a word that we have heard thrown around a lot lately in video games, and developers each have their own take on what it means to make a game truly cinematic. Some create elaborate set pieces for the player to experience, overwhelming them with action, noise, and movement, while maybe a different developer might focus on including a strong narrative to convey that cinematic quality that they want to associate with their games. Others might put all their time and attention into impressive cutscenes for the player to watch and build that emotional climax as part of the story. There is one element that I know as a video creator can be extremely powerful when it comes to creating an emotional impact with the player, even if they don't notice it. And no, I'm not talking about black bars or 30 frames a second cap. What I'm talking about is editing, because it's not always what the player is shown. Sometimes it's more important about how the different parts of the scene are shown to us. In recent years, we have had an increasing push to merge the cinematic nature of film and the interactivity of video games, both with good and bad results. The studio that has taken this as one of their prime goals when creating games is Naughty Dog. From their early beginnings making Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter, to recent games like Uncharted and The Last of Us. They continue to show a growth and maturity towards making these cinematic experiences because they have grown with us in their push for creating not just a game for the player, but a true experience. In The Last of Us, Naughty Dog made their largest leap in how they edit together the player experience to create a story that emotionally connects with the player. Two of the three main techniques that they use and that can be seen throughout the game can both be observed from the powerful introduction in The Last of Us. The most powerful of these techniques being the cut to black. This type of cut is widely used, but not always used correctly. The most effective way to use this type of cut in either games or film is not nearly as reliant on what's being shown to the viewer, but rather finding that right moment to end the scene. Too early and it seems like any other cut, and too late and we might be left wondering why in the world a shot is being held for too long. In The Last of Us, this cut is used as an emphasis for the ending of each act of the game, generally broken up into the introduction, the summer, fall, winter, and then spring. What is special about their use of this in the game compared to regular transitions that we might see in other games is that they're not meant to stand out as an exclamation mark at the end of a story, like planting a flag at the top of a mountain. Instead, it's used more as an ellipses, not celebrating that we finally reached the top of that mountain, but rather a pause as we consider where we've come from and where we might go next. This transition does not tie up every act or scene that it's used in with a nice pretty little bow, because it lends itself to leaving the player with a moment of pause after that cut and the feeling of what happens next. In similar situations in either film or games, a common way to conclude a story is through the use of a fade to black, as many of us have been programmed to interpret as the ending of a video or a day or a story. Either way, we as the viewer are very familiar with the finality that these type of video cuts signify. However, when the cut to black is executed well and abruptly, it can lead to the viewer feeling almost like there was more to be seen and more to the story to be told than what was experienced. Sometimes developers or producers can use this pause to lend to the idea that the story will be continuing without us with small gestures. This can be seen when we first meet Ellie and have to leave Tess with Marlene as they go off to find guns, and we see a hint at the continuing of a conversation just frames before the scene ends, giving the world a appearance that it is existing and continuing with or without the player. Not just showing up in the cutscenes, the cut to black is used much more often in-game, depending on how good you are at playing. Because every time the player gets killed, we get a similar, not always effective, cut to black with a quick audio buildup leading to that cut. However, in normal play, when the player is killed, the impact of this cut is not very strong because this transition while looking at Joel lying on the ground is a whole lot different than when you are being attacked by the infected. In the latter cases, we are pushed into small pre-made animations that the developers are able to control the pacing and climax of the moments, thus allowing the game to know when the right time to cut is. Like just before Joel gets his face turned into hamburger, or the moment a clicker just tears right into your neck. The timing of each of these pre-made animations makes each of the deaths vastly more impactful than any other death animation within the game, all thanks to knowing the right moment to cut. And jumping back to the beginning of the game, that second editing technique that we will see from the introduction throughout the game shows the passage of time. Typically in movies, the passage of time is illustrated through a fade to black before fading from black to a new scene or location. We as the viewers have learned that this means we're starting something new. Rather than using this technique of dipping to black to show the passage of time, The Last of Us chooses to show the time passing through a cut to a very similar image, but further ahead in time. To illustrate this, we see this technique used in the introduction with Joel on the couch with Sarah, cutting to Joel on the couch with Sarah next to him. This is effective because rather than cutting to a different object or location, which might confuse the player, not making them aware that time has passed or what the setting is and where we've moved to, this technique is clean, and it's an easy way to reduce the amount of new information that the developers need to show. Keeping the camera on the same subject, we can draw quick conclusions that if it is the same subject, but the lighting has changed, the position has changed, or part of their surroundings have changed, that the passage of time has occurred. Editing for the passage of time can be seen throughout each of the 5 main acts that I mentioned before, with each of those small skips forward in time not really showing us how long each of those jumps take. Take for example the transition we get while Joel and Ellie are driving away from Bill's town, and the next moment we're in Pittsburgh. To give you an idea of how far away those two are, it would take about 9 hours of regular freeway driving speeds to get there, not accounting for the needing to find gas, food, supplies, the whole apocalypse thing. But we don't see that. We just see one quick, clean cut, unaware of if the drive took 1 day or 1 week. And that's where the beauty of this editing technique comes to play, because it really doesn't matter. Because no matter what happened between those two cities, they're right exactly where we left them, sitting in the truck pushing east in search of the fireflies. The Last of Us makes use of many video and game editing techniques, but there's one that we don't see because it would not be possible due to the nature of the main game. However, because of the DLC Left Behind tells a different type of story, this different technique is possible. It comes in the form of not just an editing technique, but also a storytelling technique as well. It is called Meanwhile Back at the Ranch. This is a common storytelling method that's used across books, films, and recently video games, and is used to tell 2 or more stories at the same time. To do this, we must first start the story. In the case of Left Behind, after we've gotten a quick introduction of where and when the DLC takes place, we start off with Ellie and the introduction of the mall that we further explore throughout the DLC. As we explore, the conflict and intensity increases through the atmosphere and the tension of trying and failing again and again to find medicine that Joel needs. This finally reaches a soft peak as we get closer to the helicopter that should have the medicine that we need. And then the story shifts. This places us not only in a different scene, but in an entirely different time and location that we are quickly introduced to at the beginning of the DLC. Now we hear about this larger story at the end of the main game and how it is because of this catalyst of an experience that solidifies Ellie's fears of being alone and losing everyone around her. Shifting the perspective to Ellie and Riley, we get a new perspective on the conflict and intensity that will grow to a climax in the form of personal conflict and character growth between her and Riley. This juxtaposed to the real conflict that we're fighting through with Ellie as she looks for medicine to find for Joel and get back to him. This is where the Meanwhile Back at the Ranch method comes to play, because the stories have been established and the overall story will allow it to jump back and forth between the two. Much like the transition from Ellie and Joel to Ellie and Riley, the transition back takes place near a peak intensity. In this case, we get the opening of a door, a look of amazement, and "Are you kidding?" and then cut. Meanwhile, back at the ranch. We are transported away from the peak of one story and to the base of the original, at which point we will journey with Ellie through her growing conflict until a peak, then meanwhile back at the ranch, and we're back with Ellie and Riley. This is how the story continues, moving back and forth between the stories, waiting until one story hits its peak, then taking us back to the other. Now the reason this technique is so effective is because it is able to preserve pacing of the stories while creating an emotionally engaging transition between the two stories, leaving us wanting more from one story we just left, but excited to continue one we left even earlier. These stories could have been told numerous ways and cut together even countless more. They chose to tell this story in this order and pay very close attention to the suspense, the conflict, and most importantly, the emotion in every scene transition. It is through this type of thoughtful editing that Naughty Dog has shown its push for not just more action in the cinematic experience, but nuance and emotion through choosing the right moment to move from scene to scene, and the transition that takes us there. Hold on, just before you jump over to another video, I just want to remind you that I am doing my giveaway this month for a PC copy of the recent Prey game by Arcane Studios. It was one of my first videos as part of my Pixel Report series. All you gotta do is hit that subscribe button right down below, and I'll be picking out a winner at the end of this month. Now I want to thank you very much for watching this video of The Last of Us. I love the game and I love some of the unique things that it does, and I'm glad that I got to share that, and I hope that you enjoy it. If you loved what you saw, remember to hit that subscribe button right down there. If you liked it, thumbs up. If you had something that you didn't quite agree with, please drop it down in the comments. I'm always up for some criticism or anything like that. I'm not afraid of that. If you really didn't like something, please, there is a thumbs down button there as well. I'm not afraid of it, trust me. So if you want to follow along with some of the stuff that I'm not necessarily going to be posting here directly onto YouTube, remember to check out my Twitter at TrueDevinJ and my website TrueDevinJ.com. And I'm going to be posting stuff there. It's still growing, it's still adapting, but it's something that I'm going to be working on a lot over this next fall. And just we're going to see where it goes from there. Aside from that, this has been Devin J, and I cannot wait to see you on the next one. Thanks.